from the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee. I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Well, for the last several episodes, we've been dancing around the issues, two of them. One being the need for mutual aid and how we need to start concentrating on that as a central focus of the resistance. And then the other, this upcoming date of April 20th, which is this following Sunday, Easter Sunday, as a matter of fact. That's the 90-day deadline that the Orange Menace gave to his people to come back with their report. He asked them through an executive order on Inauguration Day to recommend whether or not he should invoke the Insurrection Act, which then would give him the power to declare martial law. So this is very serious. It's been getting some attention. So we've been talking about these two things, this possibility of martial law and the need for us to concentrate on mutual aid. Well, I want to ask you to, if you didn't hear it, to go back and check Charles Purcell Presents episode 97, which we released over the weekend. And we finally got around to fulfilling that promise. We devoted that episode to mutual aid. What it is, what it isn't, why we need it right now. And most importantly, some tips on how to do it. So if you didn't hear that one, go to your platform and find it, or go to the website, charlespurcell.com. I really want you to hear that episode. And today, we're going to spend most of our time on this issue of the Insurrection Act and the possibility of martial law. Without tearing our hair out, without panicking, but taking it very seriously and talking about what we really need to prepare, worst case scenario. All right, so let's do that. First, remind you of some events and boycotts coming up. April 18th is Friday of this week. That's our economic blackout number 2. Everybody, everywhere, all at once, a full national boycott. We buy nothing for 24 hours on Friday, April 18th. So make sure you know that that's happening. Make sure you know your people are updated and everybody has their plan. Tesla takedowns continue. Good. Every Saturday here in Milwaukee. Check your local information. The big day, April 19th. That's this coming Saturday. This is a worldwide day of action. Now, there's been a little bit of confusion, but there's really no need. Whatever you're doing in your state, in your city, with your people, it's all good. If you're having a big march, a big rally, great. They're calling it a day of action. And by they, I mean this loose affiliation of different groups. The ones we keep mentioning, Hands Off 2025, Indivisible.org, 5050.1, 5by15.org, or whatever, whoever you're hooked up with. It's a huge coalition. But April 19th is a big international day. Doesn't necessarily have to be a big march or rally. Day of action implies that it could be, lots of things. It can be any kind of community action, donating to local organizations, hosting an event, a big, picnic or a concert, a clothing drive, meetups, discussion groups. They're just endless possibilities. Whatever you guys want to do in your particular area, in your particular group, join in on this day of action, April 19th. Now, I'm still hoping whatever you do, it has a public front. I hope you're trying to get some headlines. It couldn't be more important. We need to get coverage. We need to get cameras. We need to get footage. We need to be on the news. We're in the stage now where we need to be a big part of the attention sphere. Okay, so that's April 19th. Whatever you're doing, I hope it's something. April 19th, let's get together. Let's get some headlines. Looking ahead to next week, Earth Day is April 22nd, Tuesday, April 22nd, Earth Day. I hope you have some plans for that. All right, let's get some headlines out of the way. I just really feel I need to continue each week with at least a few headlines to remind us of what we're fighting against here. The Orange Menace and his fascist regime are taking leaps forward literally every day. Yeah, they've got a pace going that I don't think we're not matching. Let's be honest. As I see it, we're not matching their pace. In an unprecedented, historic move, the Orange Menace has directed his Department of Justice to investigate 2 former administration officials who criticized him. So he's literally trying to jail people for disagreeing with him. Yeah, that's the level we've reached here. Wired has another great report this week. They're doing really excellent work lately about how Dodgy has infiltrated the IRS in what they're calling a giant hackathon. Their goal is to build a system that will be able to access all IRS records. So the Muskrat has your name, address, job data, social security number. It can be freely shared with data from other agencies. All happening as we speak. Just this week, the government sent out thousands of threatening emails to green card holders, terminating their status for reasons that they just dream up themselves. Heather Cox Richardson reporting on this, giving them 7 days to leave the United States. Over 500 students and researchers have had their visas canceled. There's this Venn diagram you can picture. They're anti-university, they're anti-intellectual. The other circle is anti-free speech. The other circle is white supremacy. The other circle is mass deportations and xenophobia, a hatred for immigrants. And they all come together in this Venn diagram. Mentioned earlier, they don't really have the capacity to do the mass deportations they promised. So they're terrorizing and they're targeting. And they're hitting 2, 3, 4, 5 birds with one stone here. Anti-free speech, anti-university, anti-immigrant, white supremacy. Virtually every university in this nation has been touched. Some of it has reached the courts, but we've talked at length about that. The latest on Kilmar Abrego Garcia, which the Supreme Court now has ordered the regime to return Garcia, and they're balking. They keep slow rolling it to the point of contempt. I don't know when they're going to... The court at some point has to declare contempt. They've told us that he is alive, that Garcia is alive and secure, that's their quote, alive and secure, in the CCOT prison. Some doubt that. But yeah, the court has ordered his return, and they keep giving the regime another day here, another day there. Okay, like giving them every opportunity, at least give us daily updates, and they're not even doing that. One phone call. It's a 5-hour flight. He could be home tonight. Okay, so there's some resistance. That's good. Let's call out the resistance. Wisconsin Superintendent of Schools says they will not obey ridiculous DEI orders. Said, nope, we're not going to end programs. $216 million in federal funds are at risk. But we have to stand up. Without standing up, we're done for. Federal officials tried to enter a Los Angeles school. The school refused to admit them, denied entry. Good for them. As I mentioned, Bernie and AOC, their rally in Los Angeles, attended by up to 60,000. The resistance is here. Okay, martial law, the Insurrection Act. Let's talk about this. There have been several articles. You can read about this in detail. I want to discuss one in particular. What to do if the Insurrection Act is invoked. Originally published at wagingnonviolence.org. Article by Daniel Hunter. It's been reprinted in several publications. So as you and I have discussed before, day one of the regime signed an executive order, called for the Secretary of Defense and Homeland Security to submit a joint report in 90 days, and that's April 20th. The report will offer any recommendations regarding actions the regime could take, specifically regarding the southern border. But as you and I have discussed, certainly it has everything to do with suppressing the resistance as well. especially when you consider it along with the story we talked about a couple of episodes ago, the way the federal government basically takes over the District of Columbia entirely, especially when it comes to police enforcement. So in every way, in every shape, they're preparing for and rigging the power structure to suppress any organized resistance. So this directive he gave to his people regarding the Insurrection Act, it comes due on Sunday, April 20th. If the Insurrection Act, which dates back to 1807, were to be invoked, it gives the president special emergency powers, declare an emergency at the border, declare an emergency because of some sort of resistance uprising. Now the president can deploy the U.S. military against American citizens, federalize the National Guard. So this article that I'm recommending is what we need to know, how we need to prepare. Because this is not a Chicken Little scenario. This is absolutely within the realm of possibility. Many articles, many commentators, many of whom are saying, oh yeah, it's happening. Now, if it doesn't, I'll be the first one to say, great. I'm not going to apologize for sounding the warning. But we'll talk about that when the time comes. So the Insurrection Act, it's an old law, goes back over 200 years. It says, in all cases of insurrection or obstruction to the laws, the President of the United States can call forth the militia or armed forces for the purpose of suppressing such insurrection. And I don't know this chapter and verse, but technically I should mention that this has been bolstered over the years. And technically now it's a series of statutes in Title 10 of the U.S. Code. Okay? The term insurrection is not defined precisely anywhere in the code. At best, they just call it, quote, unlawful obstructions, combinations, or assemblages or rebellions. So anything they decide. As if they wouldn't do that anyway, just like they can label anybody a terrorist. They just decide. Now, the Supreme Court has upheld that the president alone can decide the meaning of these words. It could weigh in, but that's unlikely. You may remember from your history classes, your civics classes, the Posse Comitatus Act. It blocks the military from being involved in civilian law enforcement. Well, that's gone under the Insurrection Act. That's suspended. The role of the military is to, quote unquote, assist civilian authorities, but not replace them. So it's technically not martial law, but again, those are just words on paper when it comes to this regime. We know through recent history and reporting what the regime wanted to do during the Black Lives Matter protests, as is so often the case and often mentioned in the first administration. Thank God there were people around him able to stop him. That's now out the window, of course. So by declaring the Insurrection Act, now no holds are barred. Door-to-door searching for undocumented residents, Coast Guard patrolling the waters, calling the military, calling the Marines to shut down legal protests. Of course, it would all wind up in the courts, but we know how effective they've been. Now, the Insurrection Act has been used a few times, but in a very limited way and by presidents who weren't maniacs. Lincoln used it in the Civil War. Grant used it against the Ku Klux Klan. LBJ used it to end segregation in the South. Most recently, Bush Sr. invoked the Insurrection Act during the LA riots. But limited scope, limited time, again, by presidents who weren't maniacal tyrants. We're through a whole different looking glass now. Legal experts say the door is just wide open for abuse. So this Daniel Hunter, who wrote this article, joined with the Brennan Center for Justice to run kind of a game theory on this thing, a tabletop scenario. And I guess they had some pretty serious people, politicos and military experts, and they went through these possible scenarios. And when they gamed it out, there was some good news and bad news. In their simulation, the military refused to follow the orders on door-to-door raids. The military knew they couldn't interact with civilians. Good. But then, very troubling, the Judge Advocate General approved this use of the military. They very happily sent troops to the border. So in this simulation, when the military said, no, we're not going to mix it up with civilians in the street, the Orange Menace tried an end around, tried to rearrange the military so he could give direct orders to the National Guard and parts of the Army, which he reordered. He had Pete Hegseth push around like Legos. So in that scenario, he had success. Troops were ordered and they complied to work in coordination with ICE. The Orange Menace deputized right-wing militias, military contractors, and here's where it got really dangerous, really fast. Private militias got very aggressive in a hurry, shooting people trying to cross the border, getting rough with protesters. In the simulation they ran, courts were ineffective in slowing anything down. The Orange Menace continued to claim massive powers without anybody holding him back. So bottom line, this simulation was frightening. And again, these are serious people. So there are two fronts. There's the southern border and then use of the military against protesters. Once they're operating under the Insurrection Act, they'll focus first on the border and then very quickly move to criminalize protests all over the country. So how should we be prepared for this? ICE is already, as we've talked about, ICE is already literally kidnapping people, green card holders, people with student visas, just a heartbeat away from doing the same with American citizens. We've talked about the steps he's taken regarding Washington, D.C., criminalizing any kind of protest within the district, the use of the Pentagon, FBI, labeling everybody a domestic terrorist, something we've already seen through this whole Tesla takedown thing. Pam Bondi threatening 20 years in jail for keying a Tesla, calling it domestic terrorism. Again, they can label this stuff anything they want. Invoking the Insurrection Act just puts this all on steroids. And then already at the border, then looking for any excuse at all, any spark of violence that they may themselves ignite, then he can claim that as a pretext to expand his militaristic power more widely. The simplest way, the easiest thing to understand, would be creating violence within peaceful protests. Again, Black Lives Matter, perfect example. We've already seen this happen. Agents infiltrating peaceful protests, creating the violence, and creating the rationale for use of state force. This is all straight out of the authoritarian playbook. You and I talk about a lot. The guy hasn't had an original idea his whole life. All the people behind him, the people who wrote Project 2025, they certainly know what they're doing. They got all their ducks in a row. They're ready for this. And they may well get a lot of the U.S. population on their side. They'll be able to convince a good portion of folks in the United States, oh, well, we have to crack down to restore peace. Yeah, that's what they're counting on. And they'll have some success in that area, believe me. Their propaganda game is high level. So the only way to fight that is for us to communicate an absolute commitment to order, to kindness, to non-violence. We have to be 1,000% with each other. Positive messaging, calmly explaining the likelihood of future repression in a way that reduces fear. That's a lesson I need to learn. I'm trying to do that right now. I'm trying to calmly explain the likelihood of future repression in a way that reduces fear. That's the thing I'm still working on. I got to figure this out. One of the suggestions in the article I'm recommending here, behave in ways that inspire. Mentioned just the other day, the Tesla takedown protests. There's lots of music and dancing, you know? So as we go out, these mass protests, these mass rallies, we got to have some fun. We got to sing. We got to dance. We have to show clearly our values for kindness, for camaraderie. I think that's pretty good advice. Because if indeed violence is engineered by agent provocateurs, we have to remain united. We have to keep the coalition broad. Our response has to be immediate. It has to be unified. Some of us may get caught up in the violence. We have to, together, condemn all violence in a unified voice. If any stragglers on our side are falling into that trap, we have to call them out. We have to rein them in. And all the while condemning state-sanctioned violence, of course. We have to make it clear that the acts of violence are coming from one side. The kidnapping of protesters, the assaults to the Constitution. We have to, in every way possible, depict ourselves as the good guys. And we have to act in a way that we deserve that depiction. We decry all violence and Trump's attempts to divide us. We are a peaceful people who want freedom. If he uses the Insurrection Act, the only ways to constrain him are largely through public pressure, hopefully a reluctant military. I hope we can count on that. I think maybe we can. And the courts, God bless them. We keep counting on the courts. How long can they keep coming through for us? And I'll close with this. The author points to 3 strategies of public pressure: refusal, resistance, and ridicule. Few of us have the power or the wherewithal to encourage the military's refusal to obey unethical orders. The military is the most top-down institution in our society. But still, officers within the military are positioned to gum up the works. We've seen some of this happening already. Some veterans are leading the way, talking to folks in the military. More of that's going to be needed by those in a position to influence the military. One idea they came up with in their scenario planning sessions, there's a technicality that the National Guard cannot be activated twice. So, as a preemptive move, governors could activate their National Guard, and then the federal government will then be unable to repurpose them. So that's a little into the weeds, but that's something that state governments can consider. So, governors, any governors listening, or anyone who might want to write a letter to your governor, remind them, you know what, if you call up the National Guard right away, put them on the job doing something useful, the feds can't touch them. I didn't know that. That's an interesting little point. Okay, governors. So, number 1, refusal. Number 2, resistance. The good news is protests, rallies have been numerous and frequent, even more than in 2017. Press coverage is lousy, but the fact is, we're out there. We've got to keep it up. Resistance is alive and well. And within that resistance, it's got to be more than just carrying a sign and chanting and hollering, right? Seminars, trainings, know your rights trainings, learning about protest law, learning about your rights as a protester. We mentioned Pramila Jayapal has some trainings going on. Go to her website. You can find a local one. Others are doing the same. Also, we want to document everything. If we're going to claim our constitutional rights, and if some of this is going to wind up in the courts, we're going to need evidence. So, videotape everything. Video everything for your own protection, for the inevitable court cases that might arise. Share them in your socials for stoking public outrage. So, document, document, document. The writer points to Portland, when the regime really cracked down back in 2020. Remember the unmarked vans? Yeah, documenting these abductions was key. And all the while, we have to continue with a simple message. We are not violent. The regime is violent. We are not violent. And then we have to live up to that promise. Now, in the opinion of this writer, Asked the question, should those of us concerned about Trump's actions organize a mass protest right after an insurrection act is ordered? He says no. He's thinking no. Rushing to the streets with future fears, especially if his order is somewhat targeted, will likely backfire. Especially if he first concentrates on the border. Most Americans are kind of with him on the whole border issue. If our hair is on fire right at the outset, probably not good for our cause. And if we hit the streets, all the more excuse for him to hit us. So I'm not sure how I feel about this. I'm going to have to think about it a little bit. I have been saying now for weeks that it's possible that the street rallies and protests might have to take a back seat to more powerful national strikes and boycotts. You and I have talked about that quite a lot, and I still believe that. And then finally, the writer of this article, Daniel Hunter, his third category is ridicule, which kind of surprised me. But he goes on kind of at length about the great need for ridicule, for humor, for pranks, for fun. You know, things like, uses the example, Tesla now with white power steering, or Tesla goes from 0 to 1939 in 3 seconds, the swastika. So he gives some kind of lame examples. I guess I'm with him on this. There was that hack, remember, into government offices where they showed that AI video of Trump and Musk, and Trump was kissing Musk's feet. Remember that AI video? It was really gross. I couldn't look at it. But Hunter says, quote, humor is important for our psyches and to take fascists down a notch. Beautiful Trouble reports on the clandestine insurgent rebel clown army, one example he gives, trained by professional clowns who filled their pockets with so much strange junk that it took hours and lots of paperwork when stop and searches occurred. Humor is key for morale and exposing the vulnerability of the strongman image. Give some examples. Russia and Siberia. Give some examples of protests against Milosevic. Calling for lots of street theater. This part of it, I'll say, surprised me, especially as one of 3 main points he wanted to close with. But okay, that's what he had to say. So we'll leave it at that. Once again, what should we do if Trump invokes the Insurrection Act, as he may well do, at the deadline of April 20th? And again, I point you to wagingnonviolence.org, wagingnonviolence.org, author Daniel Hunter. Okay. Just wanted to share that with you. Not to panic, but to be realistic, to be ready, and let's try to keep very positive thoughts going. So, again, thanks for listening. And if you haven't heard it, check out the Weekend Charles Purcell Presents, episode 97, where we talk at length about mutual aid. Has to be a big part of our movement. All right. Thanks a lot. I'm Charles Purcell. Talk to you on Thursday.